All right, everybody, welcome to Foundations of Indigenous Language Education, which I realize is file. That's interesting. We're going to say hi. This is week 2. We just had a wonderful conversation just to sort of get ourselves started in thinking about language revitalization. I just want to say, I don't want you to feel like you need to know all this stuff before we even get started. I've been in plenty of meetings and classes before where stuff starts. I'm like, I don't even know what they're throwing acronyms around. Like I was at this one training from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they're like, how to not use acronyms all the time. And then as soon as the thing started, they're throwing around all these. I was like, what is that thing? What is this thing? What is that thing? So I don't want to feel like um, nobody should feel like they don't belong here. I just want to really, really state that. You don't have to be educated in the thing to get educated in the thing. So we're going to keep it real casual. We're going to go at a nice, slow pace. We're not in any hurry to do anything. We got some things to read, some things to talk about, and some just continual reconceptualizing of the language work that we do. So if I were to ask the question, like envision how many speakers you would like to have of the language you work in 30 years, right? Let's say, for example, Tlingit has maybe 40 speakers right now. In 30 years, I would feel pretty comfortable if we had 1,000 speakers. There's 25,000 Tlingit people. So, just thinking of that. So thinking of, and don't share what your target number is right now, but just sort of spend some time thinking about it. And that should be something that you have a rough idea of. And, don't go for 100% because you look at like incredibly successful, amazing programs in Hawaii. They probably have 15,000 speakers of Hawaiian, and there's probably 500,000 Hawaiians. So, you know, they can really celebrate getting to a kind of a smaller percentage. So, but also just don't settle for 10. But to think of reaching that target, what I'd like you to share with us today is your name and however you want us to know you, uh, whatever you want to tell us, maybe where you're from. But then say one thing about your people or the people who work in the language, however you want to think about it, that needs to stay the same, and one thing that you think needs to change. And when I think about change, I really like to talk about change a lot. And I like to think of it as a small cup of coffee, a medium cup of coffee, and a big cup of coffee. In our PhD program, we called this the micro, the meso, and the macro. But what kinds of things need to change within individuals and families? What kinds of things need to change within your communities and the institutions? And what kinds of things need to change at the governance level? Tribal governments, state, federal, international relations, whatever those things are. But you don't have to say all of it. Just pick one thing that you think needs to stay the same and one thing that you think needs to change. If you are going to reach that goal of however many big number of speakers that you're going to have in 30 years. My name is Linnea or Lance, whichever one you want to say. Though I'd prefer those. You don't have to call me professor or doctor. Just Linnea is just fine. Let's see. I don't want to go because other people are working in Tlingit. I've been doing this work of language revitalization for quite some time. Studied a lot with folks in Hawaii. Got really close through a PhD program and really spending a lot of time talking to folks who just do amazing things on a daily basis. And they call it their kuleana, their responsibility to share it with others. And so wonderful, generous folks who are over there, both in Hilo and in Honolulu. Those are the two places where I've done the most work with folks. And yeah, I just like to share time, resources, create space for these conversations. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you folks have to say. So one thing that needs to stay the same, one thing that needs to change. Tell us who you are.
I think one thing that I think needs to stay the same is how so many more people now are pushing themselves to learn their language, their culture, everything they can. Because in 5-10 years, it's going to be 3 or 4 times as many, 10 times as many people. One thing that I think needs to change is more of our language in a class, like that being the whole part of the class. Like this program we're in, we have to take all these classes. Half of them, they're all in are about English, like writing. You got to take a writing class. Why do I got to write about old English books and not Tlingit? And we could. I think that's something that's got to change. Oh, and my name's Kachtin. I forget what else we're. Okay.
Okay. Cheese. Thanks for sharing. Wonderful. Let's keep it going.
I'll share. My name is Sandra Kowalski. I'm Inupiaq from Northwest Alaska, but I live in Fairbanks. Recently worked up in my school district for a year and a half. Was really happy to be closer to home, but also realizing that the work in public education, no matter how much I wanted it to be, there isn't enough space currently for Inupiaq language and culture, and that's somewhere that we would need to work on. And so something we need to do, I think, in our region is really explore the understanding of our approach towards Inupiaq language work. Right now, it exists at 30 minutes a week in a classroom, and we focus our efforts on 1 staff member per school. But there's what I think does not need to change and needs to stay is this really broad growing interest of people who are 30 plus years younger than I am now in revitalizing the Inupiaq language. And they not only push, they energize me right now in what I like to spend my time doing. And one of the reasons why I think their energy is so high, and this is something else that's linked to what I don't want to change, is a very broad openness to dialect and making mistakes as being, and our dialect differences as being acceptable and part of the overall learning process. 30 years ago, that wasn't a part of our learning culture. There wasn't an openness towards learning. For me to learn North Slope, in order for me to learn Inupiaq, there wasn't such an open acceptance of that. And sometimes there were some not intended to be hurtful at all. They were intended to be instructional, but the way the conversation happened about what dialects people were learning who were learners oftentimes shrunk the learner unintentionally. But now there's a lot of open conversation about our learners, about their needs, and that's exciting, and I don't want that to change. Sandra.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, and yes, these will all lead into more conversations about dialects and standardization and being inclusive, those are really good conversations to have, and also sort of the need to correct and to have everything right. And we'll talk about all that stuff. Thank you. Yeah, Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Batchelder, and I prepare teachers to work with children in our public school system here. So I believe in immersion programs, and I think that the most important thing you can do for a child is to have the child become strong in their cultural identity from birth and learn their language. So I'm in the process, our school's in the process, and our program particularly is in the process of indigenizing curriculum. And I believe there's a gentleman that referred to that earlier who was saying, why do I have to write about old English books when I could be writing Tlingit, and it could be used in a literary course. So I've been working towards trying to indigenize curriculum at UAS for a long time, patiently. And I'm going to keep doing that because I think it's so important for all of our students to be strong in their cultural identities, because as you know, assimilation doesn't work. And our children are forced to be bicultural through no fault of their own or no intent of their own. So I just, on a personal note, I moved here 8 years ago and I heard Tlingit language, and it was so beautiful. It touched my soul when I heard it, and I didn't know what a single word meant. And now I've learned some of the language, and I can sort of hear certain phrases and words that I understand, but it still has that same effect on me, and it's not even my language. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I hope so.
Jeez, thank you for sharing. Hokyunsk.
All right, Hokyunsk Duayu Tsimshianu, studying Samalyak, the language of the Tsimshian. One thing that I think needs to stay the same is the, I see a continual interest and hunger from folks, from distance learners. I think the idea that with the online classes, online language groups, things like that have really opened up a lot of doors for Tsimshian language learners that weren't there 5 years ago. If you were away from where the class was being taught, if you were away from Metlakatla or Ketchikan or occasionally at UAS, then that's it. And it was similar. I had a similar experience with learning with carving and things like that. When I first asked, it was like, well, you learn from Jack and Met. Like that was you learn that when you're young from this person, because that's what the resources were like. That's what the experiences were like. So the idea that there are not only more online resources available with classrooms and things like that, because we have so many more Tsimshian away from traditional lands than we have on them, has really brought a swelling of interest. And that's what I'd like to see keep going, because if that just keeps multiplying at the same rate, boy, we're going to have plenty more students coming in. One thing that I would like to see change is I think actually kind of speaks to what Sandra was speaking about earlier, is I think the way we approach teaching the language needs to be a lot more student need based, rather than checking academic boxes in a certain way. And I think balancing that tough balancing act, especially in academic environments, is tough. But I think steering as much of the resources towards the student needs versus, I guess, other influences is really going to help build speakers and take a lot of sort of how do I put it, seem a lot more like an accessible gift than a huge mountain to climb, which I know if you were looking at studying Samalyak 10 years ago, that's really what it looked like. So anyway, that's my direction.
Let's keep it going. It's wonderful stuff.
I can go.
Thank you.
Ang alarum ayara asach dakok unangach akok akutanamilra nangir dakok arach dakok tani inam tunangin guran and rarisak. Hi everybody, I'm Haley Hannah Steppeton. I'm Unangach. I was born and raised in my village in Akutan in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska, and I live on Dena'ina lands in what is known as Anchorage now. Just want to say kakasiku Kune for this class. I saw it on Facebook a little late, and I'll be here on Mondays. So I'm super stoked to be here. So what do I not want to change? I teach Unangam Tunu at UAA, and I've been working on the language for the past 8 years pretty intensively with Elder Moses Dirks. And he was my first language teacher when I was in like 3rd grade in Unalaska. The language isn't spoken in my village anymore. It wasn't transmitted to my dad's generation because of the US assimilationist boarding schools and the boarding school curriculum that manifested in village schools across the Aleutian Islands that demanded the halting in transmitting the language to my dad's generation as a way, it was a way for my grandparents to protect them. And this happened until the 70s and 80s in my village, the types of assimilationist policies that were abusive. So it's been like really rough getting back into and being able to learn a language that, where my dialect is, it fell asleep with my grandparents and their generation. And so what Sandra, I'm sorry, I missed your Inupiaq name. What you were saying about the dialects like really spoke to me because I grew up speaking and learning the Nirorech dialect of Unangam Tinu, which is like 1,000 miles away from my village, that dialect doesn't come from my area of the Aleutian Islands. So I don't want to change is what we're doing right now is we're working on this Awisnikangin, which is a working group to create words in Unangam Tinu. We've tried to do this maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and it didn't work because people fight about, making new words. And it's also not really an organic way for language to standardization is a problem, right? Like, so it's not like an organic way that language, like in English, for example, continues to build and thrive, that is just created out of conversations and a lot of kids and trends and all of this stuff. But anyway, right now we're working on creating new words and we're like getting along, which is really good. And we'll hopefully implement them so that we can be able to talk about and be these like modern, living, thriving people who aren't bound to this, like untouched anthropological past that doesn't exist. And then what I hope will change is sort of like a lot of what was touched on in the beginning of this with policing of language. This also means like in my work, I continuously fight the rhetoric of loss or even using that. I just approach teaching the language not like very intentionally and not from a position to shame people into using language or learning language with statements like, quote, our language will die, or fear about language death, which are real things. I just feel like using it the way that it's used is a tactic of shame. And we learned that from the US boarding school policies. And I don't want to perpetuate that when it comes to language. So I'm very intentional about not shaming people into learning the language. And I feel like that rhetoric is one of shame. I don't think it's a good tactic. And also policing the language is not just that, it's also, like a lot of healing needs to happen in our communities so that people aren't laterally violent about like learning and teaching language. And this is, I was so nervous even teaching Unangam Tunu this semester because I knew that would expose me to lateral violence from people who don't think I'm ready to teach, who think that they are, and just a lot of the behaviors that Hune and others brought up in the beginning. So I hope that that can change, and that requires healing. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, and it's always important to remember, I think, that I think in some regards, like a colonial view of education is like the professor is the master of the knowledge. And I really think we move away from that stuff, because even like the very first college course I taught, someone was asking me stuff, I was like, I don't know, just go find out. And I think they wrote about that later, like, how could he not know and teach this class? I was like, I was teaching like writing in English, like basic college writing. I was like, man, I don't know. That sounds fun. Let's go find out. That's what we're here for. So I think a teacher is a facilitator and is sort of a group, taking the group in different directions, but also giving the group lots of self-control. All right, wonderful. This is great stuff. Who else wants to tell us who you are and what you think?
Can I go next?
Uh-huh.
My name is Linnea Wallace. My trinket name that I am most comfortable using is Sonny. And the number of people that I would like to see in my community in 25 years, I would love to see at least 4 or 5 people per household that could speak Tlingit with one another. So I don't know how many households there are, but if I just were to take a percentage of it and just say at least 1,500 households, that would be wonderful. I was fortunate when I was growing up. I grew up with the elders and they would come and visit, and it was spoken quite freely across the kitchen table, you know, with a can of peaches that was opened up, and, you know, pilot bread crackers and seal oil. And, you know, they put seal oil in their tea, which is really good. But yeah, I'd say about 1,500. And what I would like to see change is the cost and the loopholes that people have to go through in order to keep their language alive. So when I spent 4 months in London, they had a program called the Cultural Heritage Lottery Program. That lottery program was enough to raise like $8 billion a year. And they paid for statues and they paid for marble, you know, arches, but they paid for things for the museum. And so I think maybe taking control of the reins and having that source of funding there that's just made so that we can continue, not have it be relying on a whim of someone who, oh, this is a good idea, we'll fund this for 3 years, but then we won't fund it after that. So you always have these, I don't know, I don't want to say, but just having that control so that we can say what we're willing to fund, how we want to fund it, and to meet that goal, like in 25 years, a solid plan, money that's there to back it up. So everybody makes, I'm dreaming now, $35 an hour, taking classes, doing things, working on projects. And that's just the beginning pay of what a teacher has. So things that I would like to see continue happen is just getting together and working towards, you know, helping one another out and just being able to share ideas, just the cohorts, and then all the different language programs, and just holding them up and keeping them alive. And that's it. Goodness cheese. Thank you.
Geez, okay. Let's keep it going. I think 8 left by my count.
I can go. Should I wait till I don't know. Can you tell which one I am? I'm Nawaya. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them. And what am I supposed to say? I don't know.
Just one thing that you think needs to stay the same and one thing that you think needs to change in order to hit the language goal.
I guess it's easiest for me to answer what needs to change, I guess, for me. And it's because Linnea sort of was talking about something similar. You know, I feel like there's been so much money poured into language over the years. If all that money had done something, then I don't know, we might be in a different place. But you know, it's like we have to. It's also because there's so much of it is federal dollars. I think we just like need our own money to decide what we want to do with it, which I think is exactly what Liana was saying as well. So I'm just piggybacking off of Liana's thing that needs to change. But it's a thing that I think about all the time. Like, how do we create our own institutions that are well funded, that can do this work, and that don't have to rely on all the like stipulations that federal dollars have on them, and um, and that are also like sustainable, not like one-off things. Like, you know, the program that we're in might be a one-off. You know, there might not ever be another cohort that goes through this program, and so like, how do we assess whether that was actually effective use of federal dollars, right? And um, yeah, I don't know. Something that needs to stay the same though is I don't know, lots of things, but um, but I can't name one in particular right now. I don't know. Yeah, I just keep on thinking of things that need to change. What's something that needs to? I'll come back to this.
Yeah, no,
Stay the
no
same.
worries, no worries, no pressure. And yeah, fiscal sovereignty is a big part because I feel like while there is a lot of grants and other things generally available, it's another one of those things where the people who know how to do it continue to get it, and the people who don't typically don't. And so it's yet another one of those things where like you got to know how to do the thing in order to do the thing. And I think those are just generally things we need to continue to examine and also figure out like there need to be a lot more direct allocations and a lot more of footing the bill from people who were tied to genocide,
Yes,
which includes
agreed.
religious entities, governments, but federal and state level, and just education as an entire system. So.
I really want AFN to pass like a resolution that says that the churches owe all the tribes reparations. I don't, that's probably not like political reality. Like the AFN board probably would not pass that,
Yeah,
but they should.
I feel like if there was enough initiative and
I think if you got it started at elders and youth, and then like a youth prop forward that, anyway, I've been strategizing about this for a while in my own brain. But if you got a youth to start it at elders and youth, then you don't have to introduce it way ahead of time because the elders and youth ones go straight through to AFN and then get voted on. Um, so you don't have to submit it way ahead of time, and then you sort of catch them off guard. And then how do they say no to the youth? Anyway,
yeah, how do they say no to the youth? And then I often thought there's a way to sort of make a few contacts. Like I've got some contacts within a few different churches, and some of them, their kids have learned the language, and some of them are really conscious of this history of genocide that certain churches have. Well, a lot of them. And I've always wondered if there's a way to initiate some of these conversations to say, you know what, we would really like to give you a chance to get out ahead of this thing before it goes public. This is the plan. The plan is to go this route and to sort of, it kind of almost comes back to the shaming thing to say, what if you guys just gave this sizable donation and this public apology and recognition? I mean, that's a huge thing, I think, if like the whole Presbyterian Church or Salvation Army or Catholic Church, whatever the thing is. And I remember I was trying to share this one year at our tribal assembly, and someone came up to me and said, "Don't go after our churches." And I said, "I'm not going after anybody. I'm just saying my little brother, well, a relative of mine, got in trouble one time, and I went to court with them, and they said, you broke the window, you pay for the window." And I thought, oh yeah, shouldn't that be for everybody? And so you had a role. So I think if entities stood up and said, we fully acknowledge what we did, and it was wrong, and we see that now. We tried to extinguish these languages. We tortured children. We beat children. We abused children. And we are sorry. This goes against the very doctrines of what we do. and we can never take back what we did. But to begin, we want to be full partners in the revitalization of the languages of Alaska, and we're cutting the check. I mean, that would be so huge. I think that would create this seismic level shift, and maybe others could get behind it. So it doesn't have to be this thing where we're going to tell them what you did, which maybe we should do, but also just sort of like, I guess I would want to appeal to compassion. Although sometimes I think, does that really exist in all things? But good points, good conversation.
It's like stick and carrot. You gotta,
Yeah, right? Okay, let's see. That's right. Yes, and we can shame, or we shame lots. And so, all right, let's keep it going. Who hasn't got? I think we got 7 left, maybe, by my count. Maybe more. Just say who you are. Oh, go ahead.
So, I love the sense of community that's in the language program and how there's less of a stigma, even from when I was a kid, about being Native and learning about the culture, and more people are embracing it. And I would love for everyone to be speaking the language on the land in 25 years and having all the original names go back to what they were, and having the original caretakers take care of the land, and then having more media available for the world to learn more about and have it accessible to the youth and everyone. Like Red Dogs, I love it so much, all the humor, and it's relatable to people even though it's in Oklahoma. And so just imagine like more things in the language with the humor and everything just for our people. It's just so special.
Jeez. Yes, if you haven't seen Reservation Dogs, check it out. Also check out Rutherford Falls. Those are wonderful things that have emerged. In the...
don't have a Peacock or Hulu.
I gave you my password.
Oh yeah, I forgot that.
Look in your text.
Oh yeah, because you guys live in the same house. Of course.
Oh yes, we live together, right?
Right.
My roommate.
One time I was giving a talk like in here in the Egan's lecture in the library. And I was getting to the part about the churches, and I was like, and at some point someone's gonna have to, and then like all the power went out. But it happened to be a power outage, but there was a moment where I was like, are they coming for me? All right, who wants to go next?
I can,
Duck Juice.
duck juice, sow each, and it's me duck juice. One thing I want to see stay the same is love of culture and pride in it. Those who are already grounded in the culture, it's easier for them to relate to the language. Change. One thing I would like to change is the concept that Hatil is too hard to learn. Kune, you said this before, and it really sticks with me, is how do we transition from a language that we are using to, how do we transition from a language that we are learning to a language that we are using? Language needs to be spoken in the home. And our hint in reading that we just did is about start off teaching students conversation. It might be small stuff like sit and stand, but you build on it, and pretty soon they know commands like close the door, hang up your coat, discussing the weather and how they're feeling. And so keep building on that, and those students will know conversation, which is really important. I'm a book learner, and I have not, I'm not at a good retention rate. So I really rely on my books. And I post a lot of phrases and stuff on I'm Learning Haida on Facebook, because that's gonna always be there and it's gonna always be a reference for me. So if I wanna, how did I say that sentence again? I could just search in one word and up it'll pop and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's it. So yeah, conversation is really important. This style of teaching that Hinton is recommending, it aligns with the Aunt Dolores Churchill's thought to just start speaking Haida, because that's how she learned it growing up. She heard the language spoken, and so yeah, I like this, the teachings by Linnea and Hinton, because they're always on the mark, and so it spurs me on to learn more conversation, and that's also why I'm writing a book on scripted conversations, to make that switch from a language I'm using, learning, I keep saying it backwards, to a language that I'm using, and then start using those conversation techniques.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I do think that there's a real benefit to having a whole series of scripted conversations and probably even specific stories and speeches that are really just memorized. And then you can sort of build off of that memorization. But there is something to being able to do a thing that's something that you do on a daily basis. And so a lot of that too comes down to just really analyzing, what do our people like to talk about? And everybody's different, yes, but there's going to be a lot of common things. And so the hunting, the fishing, the gathering, the out on the lands, whatever sports you guys are, card games, all kinds of stuff, and jokes and funny stories and serious things and being proud of relatives and all kinds of stuff like that. So fabulous. Who's left? Yvonne.
Yeah, Shalaknai, Shoji Ivancho Peter Oji, Washing Watsanithli, Tanant at O Directory. My name is Yvonne Peter, and I am the director of Tanant at O, which is a full immersion Gwich'in language nest. All of our kids are now 2 years old to 3 years old. We're in our 5th month of operation, so we're in a very, very, very steep learning curve. Add about 10 more berries onto that, please. And it's both challenging and profound and beautiful at the same time. And yes, to the readings that we just did. It's interesting because one of them I gifted a youth award to about 15 years ago when she was just in her undergrad, and now she's writing a doctorate and writing publications on as a linguist, which is really neat to see. And yeah, I mean, maybe later in the class I'll share a little bit more about kind of this journey that we've been on and the difference between studying the language and being immersed in it for 32 hours a week, and kind of how the language learning journey transforms and when you're in a space or context like that. But for now, for the not change is, I just think about, we've been really blessed with pretty much all of the elders that are first language speakers of Gwich'in have been so supportive and loving and encouraging to our whole team and everyone involved in this effort. Many of them just said this we've been waiting for something like this to finally happen. And they're just happy that it did it in their lifetime so that they can contribute their knowledge to help us. So I don't want that to change. I want that to stay the same, that we have that kind of guidance and support and blessing from our elders. And that they want to share more than we're able to actually like record and document and make use of how much they want. So that goes to what I want to change, which is that we just need a massive expansion and capacity of people wanting to learn the language, of resources moving into the language, so that we can build out more language courses, language curriculum materials, and spaces for people to be able to learn the language, who want to learn but can't afford to go to college or have the time to change their entire life to be in a language lesson for 32 hours a week, but still have the opportunity to learn the language. And so I think that's, in my mind, like a major next step is just, how do all these people who I know want to learn the language get access to support, resources, and opportunities to learn the language? And I spend a lot of my time lately thinking about that. How do we have free resources become available that can support people? So those are my thoughts for today.
Wonderful. Yeah. And so Yvonne and I used to talk a lot when he was working at the University of Alaska about how do we make this happen? And I think we're reaching a possibility within UAS so that when we have a language class, and our goal is to teach all 3 languages at all 3 levels and beyond. And so the beyond would be content courses in your language, which we're still building towards. But ideally would have sort of beginning Tlingit, beginning Haida, beginning Tsimshian, intermediate and advanced of all 3 of those languages. And every semester would be teaching. So 9 language classes at every given semester. That's our goal. We're not there yet. I think we're close. We're maybe at 7 right now, so we need to add 2 more. But then every one of those classes would have a 0 credit option, which would cost $0, and basically say, if you want to just learn the language, you can come along with us. There are some, we'll probably have to have a Zoom link and encourage those folks to just log in, but it would be just like you folks who are online in this class. You just join the online portion. It's not the best way to do everything, but it is one option, and I think we're figuring out a solution to that. But then I don't want the solution to be, as long as Native entities pay for it, it will happen, because then we're here resolving the thing that we didn't do. So I don't think that colonialism is the thing for Indigenous peoples to solve. I think maybe at the theoretical and at the workload level, yes, but I gotta start sending out some invoices to a whole bunch of people. But yeah, wonderful stuff. And I'd love to hear more as we sort of continue to go along the semester. And congratulations on your nest. It's so wonderful. Let's see. 7 minutes. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to clarify, it's our nest. It's a big team and a lot of people that are contributing, making it happen. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that was a plural, y'alls. English doesn't have a very good second person plural. And English also doesn't have a very good third person singular or plural. So shame on that impoverished language that we all use. And I do want to note, I want to keep it going, but we'll also, if you didn't get a chance to share today, we're going to pick this. We're still getting started Wednesday. I did drop some notes into the chat on, let's see, I want to make sure that I share. I think there's a Google folder with readings in it, but then there's another Google folder that's basically our class. So I'll probably share that. I'll figure out some ways to share it with the whole group. But basically, when you look at that thing for the notes, like that's the sort of stuff I want us to talk about on Wednesday. So take a look at that in addition to those 2 readings. It's just based on those readings, but it's some other thoughts that I think will ground us in these conversations we're going to continue to have. And if there's anything, if you don't know what the word means, let's talk about what it means. This is not a linguistics class, but we do use some terms that are used in linguistics. But there's probably linguists who would yell at me that I'm using those terms wrong, but they can go teach their own classes. Okay, maybe we got time for one more. Anybody not go yet?
God say
Lahishu and a duke de the Hunkaku, the Hundinaka health day, let talk at seasoning, but they took it and a gas hit and a snare. Danaka had Hidaga Tutser get you had come to. Hi, my name's Anna. My Danaka name is Mila Tova. I'm Iak and also Dene from Calpig, Caribou Clan. I'm learning Danaka and Tlingit. And good to see you guys. I think to me, something that needs to stay the same is this program that a few of us are participating in. It's called Hayuk Atangi Dei, our language pathways. And it's a partnership between UAS and Sea Alaska Heritage Institute. And it's a full scholarship for language learners. And I've just never seen anything like it before. It includes a housing stipend, it includes a paid internship, paid hours to listen to audio recordings and practice transcription. I'm learning so many employable skills and yet enjoying the low stress of not being thrown into teaching. I have time to work part-time in an elementary school by distance, and I'm in a very low stress role. I'm just basically coaching the teachers on their language use, and I have mentors helping me do that too. So, if we're supposed to be becoming proficient as much as we can before teaching, then this program we're in is setting us up for that. I think something that could change in my experience is like gestures. So in the reading they mentioned have some gestures. Like they said you can do a whole class in the language, even with just like 8 terms. But where I found it kind of awkward when we were practicing the teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling was like in Portuguese, everyone knew you were asking a question because they would be like, I forget the word, but they were like, is it this? And then everyone would know to nod or shake their head. But in Tlingit, sometimes the question marker is in the middle of a sentence. And I don't know, I guess I've been thinking about like sign language, how to match it up with the language. I think Jeff Lear has said something about traditional Tlingit sign language, that even elements of it lined up with classifiers and stuff like that. So I don't know, I think having a tool like that, a physical tool, would help us kind of stay in immersive environments because you'd have a physical cue. I think that would be cool.
Wonderful. Sheesh. Yeah, thanks for sharing, and thanks everybody for those who had an opportunity to share today. If you didn't, there's Wednesday, or something comes up Wednesday, there's also next Monday. A lot of this is getting to know each other, getting comfortable with each other, sharing some ideas and what we're trying to do, and then starting to move through some of the readings. So we have 2 things to read for this week. Hopefully you've already read them. One by Leanne Hinton, and one by a working group out of California. So one is called How to Teach When the Speaker Isn't Fluent, or Teacher Isn't Fluent, I think it is. And the second one was Creating More Speakers. And so those are the 2 things we're kind of going to talk about on Wednesday. And also, if you didn't have a chance to share with us who you are and what you think needs to change and what needs to stay the same in order to sort of continue language growth, we'll have a chance to listen to you all. And then we're just going to have a dialogue. So check out those notes. Those are the things that I want to make sure that we talk about as well. There's a few foundational terms I think are really important. Just the definitions, like I think for me, a lot of times, for example, the word immersion is used a lot in languages, and sometimes you'll go to a thing and you're like, well, why do I hear so much English if this, and so but also just sort of understanding what the thing is that you're doing and trying to do. And then sometimes you got to create steps to get there. Because if you have 2 speakers or 4 speakers or 10, then sometimes you've got to build yourself up. But I believe you can map that future out and get there. But a part of it is making speakers, and after that, making teachers. So we'll just keep talking about these things. And then there's a number of other items. And great to see everybody. Keep it up. Keep doing the good work. And we'll always have opportunities to share ideas and thoughts here and in other classes. So we'll see you folks on Wednesday.
You know, the other thing that's really hard about Tlingit and TPRS, you can only say positive things because the verb changes, you know, like a
Oh,
versus
Oh, yeah,
ushke.
ushke. And then, yeah, the leaders of the class were like, wait, what is
They
this
didn't
now?
understand. Yeah. They're like, wait, what?